professor. So at the dinner table, this is something that was always, really important for me and really important for my family, and something that I think it's such a privilege that we get to work with so many talented students, which we'll see today. We'll be presenting a bit on their research. So just a quick order of events so that you have it for today. We're going to be having Dr. Brenner share a little bit about her journey, about some thoughts she might have for young students and young researchers. We're then going to have some students who are going to be presenting, about 6 students presenting their research. And then finally, we're going to wrap up and let you guys go. So expect this probably to be in total about hour and a half, 2 hours, kind of in that range. Perfect. Well, I think we can skip to the next slide. We're a really amazing and diverse group in the fall cohort 2022. We have 74 students representing 10 different countries, 21 different disciplines. We've had students who have done research ranging from, as we'll see, the luxury fashion market to cancer research. To a student I worked on who did research on the marketplace for high school internships across the US and Vietnam. Research is wild. It's amazing how specific it can go. And we'll be talking about some of that today. But before we do that, I'm really excited to be sharing the stage with Dr. Brenner. So I'll just share a little bit about Dr. Brenner, and then I'll pass over to her. But Dr. Brenner is a sociologist and a college transition educator who speaks frequently with high school students on the challenges related to the college transition. So she's been a college professor, the creator of American University's first-year experience program, and a faculty director at AU's University College program. She's received multiple awards. She's very decorated, primarily around program design for first-year college students. So many of you guys, of course, will be first-year college students. So I think there's a lot of relevance there. And Dr. Brenner was also a 2019-2020 fellow at the University of California National Center for Free Speech and Civic Engagement. She's the co-author of How to College, What to Know Before You Go, again, quite relevant, and creator of the Talking College card deck, which is an original card deck of discussion prompts for college-bound students and their parents. So Dr. Brenner is incredibly thoughtful, very warm, and of course, very deep in the process of students, very much like yourself, transitioning into their next steps, which is often universities. Dr. Brenner, I'll pass to you. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you so much. I need to screen share, but it says I can't do that.
Perfect. Let's give you co-host access. That should be, I think Nancy, you just need to make Andrea into a co-host.
Yep, all done.
Okay, give me 1 second. Can everybody see that? Terrific. Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to speaking to this impressive group. And I'm going to share some of my own experiences as a sociologist and as a faculty member. And so the short talk I'm going to give you is where do I fit in the role of self in qualitative research and in academic discourse? So let us dig in. So some of this will be familiar to those of you who have just completed your research project. Some will be new, and hopefully some of it will be a little bit of an aha moment that makes you think. Again, I'm a qualitative researcher, so that's where I'm coming from. But much of this applies both to the qualitative and quantitative researcher. So why do researchers pick a particular topic to study? And there are 4 main reasons. Again, you may know this: a personal connection, a specific need in a community or in the larger world, funding opportunities, and then a mentor or another faculty member's research. You see there's an asterisk next to personal connection. I do that because that is the most common of all research, that most people do have a personal connection. It might be something as simple as I have a grandparent with Alzheimer's and I'm interested in that type of research, or in my case, which I'm going to share with you, something a little more personal. So here is another thing to think about, which is my topic of my dissertation that I wrote in 2001 when I received my PhD in sociology. My title of my dissertation is Too White to Teach Race, Student Perceptions of Racial Identity-Based Professor Credibility. And I called it a case of pedagogical malpractice. Why? Well, actually, I was assigned in my caseload that semester and I was a new faculty member, maybe 5 years in at that point, and I was assigned to teach a class on racial inequality. I had studied it for many years, and I was at the front of the room in the first day of class, and I had my students come in. It was mostly a class of juniors, college juniors, and I had one student who identified as a Black woman who came in. I didn't know her at all. She didn't know me. She took a look at me. She came up to me and she said, "Are you white?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "I can't possibly take a class that focuses on race and racial inequality with you as a faculty member." I said I understood that that was her decision. She was able to drop the class. I went on and taught a class. I had a wonderful time that semester. I taught that class many, many times at American University. But I actually got in touch with her and invited her to coffee. And I said to her, let's talk a little more. I want to dig into this. And so she told me her feelings, and we stayed in touch for about close to a year. And that actually sparked the topic of my dissertation. I was fascinated with the concept of white professors teaching a topic to students of color at predominantly white universities, if that topic was related to race and racism. So qualitative research, as you know, is grounded in methodology and looked at through a theoretical lens. So this is not a topic I studied, but a topic I just thought of the other day when I was putting my slides together, because I think it crosses a lot of disciplines. So if we're going to talk about, for example, the topic of homelessness, keep in mind that not all methodologies or all theoretical lenses will work for all research topics, right? Ethics do play and should play a large role when you're thinking about research. So as you know, here's some, but not all examples of research methodology. You might conduct a research project using interviews or focus groups or both. You might use surveys, you might use controlled experiments, observation, sometimes we call that participant observation, or secondary data analysis. And then you might also use different theoretical lenses. So I was thinking about the topic of homelessness. And if you think about homelessness, if you think about the topic of homelessness, you can look at it through different theoretical lenses. So for example, you might use an economic theory as your lens. You might talk about homelessness in relation to folks who have homes and look at their different jobs. You might look through psychological theories. There's a lot of mental health research dealing with homeless populations. You might use theories of race or inequality, or race and inequality, and talk about the differences between homeless people of color and homeless white individuals, for example. And then gender studies or feminist theory, to be more specific, is another way that you might look through homelessness. When I talk to high school students, I think the idea of a theoretical lens can be sometimes a little bit confusing. And so this is the way I've explained it to my students, and I like to explain it to you this way as well. If you think about doing a jigsaw puzzle, I don't know, maybe many of you did jigsaw puzzles during the beginning of COVID. If you are opening a jigsaw puzzle and you're spilling out the pieces, the first thing that many of us are taught to do is to frame a puzzle, right? Is to find those frame pieces. And before we put them together, we're actually going to turn them over so we can see the side where their picture is. We could do the puzzle upside down with the white paper showing, but it would be much more challenging. So if you think about methodology and methodological research, and you think about a theoretical lens, I like to think about the theoretical lens as the frame of the puzzle. It actually keeps those data points, those puzzle pieces in, and it helps to guide the way we look at something. So as a sociologist, many of us use multiple theoretical lenses in a research project. So we might incorporate economic theory if we're talking about homelessness, and also mental health theories. So again, think about theoretical research as the frame. It helps to guide your research and helps to kind of keep all those pieces in together. So there is certainly a misconception that qualitative research is totally subjective and therefore filled with bias, where there is a misconception that quantitative research is objective and therefore bias-free. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And really, this is the gist of what I want to share with you today. So my question is there really such a thing as truly objective research or a truly objective research experience? And I would argue, in fact, there is not, but that is okay, and I'll explain why. So one thing students need to remember is that three things: methodology, theoretical lenses, and things like methods of data collection, they are all what in sociology we call social constructs. So social constructs are ways that humans organize their thoughts to look at the world. But we need to keep in mind that all of those things are created by people, and they can be undone by people and recreated by people. That's fascinating. So sometimes as you move forward in college and beyond as researchers, I want you to keep that in mind, that sometimes we have a habit of saying, well, I do it this way because this is the way surveys are collected, or I do it this way because this is what the theoretical lens is telling me. But keep in mind that both that survey data and the tool for collecting surveys and that particular theoretical lens, they were all constructed by humans, and humans are flawed beings. So people, as you all know, have inherent biases. We have agendas, sometimes political agendas, and we all have different identities, which can alter the way that we set up our research projects. It can alter the way we create our research tools. It can alter the way we gather our data and the way we analyze our results. So think about the research projects that you have just completed. And if you do have a personal connection to them, and again, I'm not criticizing anyone who has brought human bias to this. It's very, very common. But I want you to think about the analysis of your results and the lens that you used based on the personal experiences that you may have had connected to your research. So what can you do with all of this information as you continue to advance your studies and research opportunities in college and beyond? Well, I would say it's all about acknowledging the truth. And what do I mean by that? So if you are unfamiliar with Jonathan Harvey's work called Footprints in the Field, I cannot rave enough about it. He coined the term theorized subjectivity. Jonathan Harvey has a PhD in critical disability studies, and he has a background in education. And he talks about theorized subjectivity as an approach that acknowledges the significance of intellectual and personal autobiography and biography of both the researchers and of the subjects. It is a critical theory, so it really kind of shakes up the status quo, but it's something, if you're unfamiliar with it, and especially if you're interested in qualitative research, I would really encourage you. It's a very readable article, and his study is wonderful, and it's very easy to understand. So in conclusion, more specifically, as a researcher, here's what I would like you to think about as you move forward in college and beyond. That your identities, and I'm not saying identity because all of us have multiple identities, will influence how you conduct your research, and your research will influence how you identify. So I want you to think about that as I shared with you my own journey to my dissertation and my personal experience. Being an insider for a group you are researching, so for example, somebody researching homelessness who is either homeless or has been formerly homeless, somebody, as I mentioned earlier, who has a personal connection to a disease or a condition, a medical condition, somebody who is interested in a particular way they see the world and want to question it. Being an insider for a group you are researching isn't necessarily an advantage, and it's not necessarily a disadvantage, but do note that it adds to your lens. And also there are significant advantages, as I mentioned earlier, to multidisciplinary foci on conducting research and analyzing. And I would say, if anything, don't only use one lens. So if you look back on a research project you just completed, and maybe you did use one lens, and that's understandable with high school level research. And think about, could I have looked at that differently? So for example, if I was studying homelessness and I was looking at it through an economic theory, my analysis is going to probably look quite different than it would if I was looking at it through a mental health theory. And then finally, no matter what type of project you take on, your own identities as a researcher, they're subjective. And as you age, they're changing. They are not objective and detached. So if you actually conducted a research project, a qualitative research project at 18 years old, and then created the same project or recreated the same project when you're 45, your analysis might look a little bit different. And then finally, my last slide, and I'd love to conclude with this, is I'd love to say to students, lose yourself in your research. As you heard in the beginning, we're all sort of geeks in some way in the research world. Just lose yourself in it. Love the data, love the analysis, lose yourself in the study of research, but don't lose yourself in the research. And meaning that, hold on to that identity, understand that you are a human, you have a lens, and it's really important. So I'm going to conclude with that. I want to say congratulations to all of you. This is an enormous accomplishment. Not only will it look wonderful on college applications, but it is just giving you such a new lens as you move forward into your college world and beyond. And congratulations on your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brenner, for that. And I love how spot on that is and how incredibly relevant, I think, for so many of our students, and particularly students doing qualitative research, but I think students really doing any type of research. We're going to leave a little bit of time for any questions. So students, I would encourage you guys to ask a question. We can pause for a second to see if there are any questions from students for Dr. Brenner as young researchers. Any questions? Well, I'll kick off with one question, Dr. Brenner. I'm kind of curious, as you talked around the importance of not losing yourself. I really like that final line. How would you think about doing that practically as a young researcher, maybe who doesn't have, I think it's any researcher, but particularly a young researcher who maybe doesn't have all of the different kind of theoretical lenses? What are like the things that you would be thinking about when entering into a research project? Particularly because I think what I have seen is that for younger researchers, a lot of the research comes from kind of me search. It's like, I've seen this thing, I think it's interesting. And so the research is often so connected to that
Right.
identity. How would you think about that?
I think it's a great question. And I would say check your bias. So when I would teach research methodologies classes in the sociology discipline, mostly to seniors as a senior capstone in college, I would ask students to record a list of their own identities. So we'd start with that. So they would say, identify as this, and there are multiple identities. So you might identify both as a college student and as a worker. You might identify as a daughter and also as a friend, as a granddaughter and as a woman of color, as a particular religion, whatever it might be. There are multiple identities that we all possess. And then I ask students to look at their research project. Depending on the project lens, it might have a hypothesis, it might have a research question. But knowing that and going through that list and sort of answering that question for themselves, knowing each one of those identities, and then taking a step back. And if there is a different lens through those different identities, pausing, not again, we're not throwing away any of our identities, but really acknowledging that I am coming at this. So for example, in my current research, I am researching the transition to college for a lot of students who are failing to thrive in their first year of college. So I'm looking at high school students and those who are failing to thrive in their first year of college and trying to come up with some theories about why this is happening. And there's lots of research out there already. But sometimes I wear a sociology hat, sometimes I wear an educator hat, and sometimes I wear a parent hat. And I don't want to throw away any of those identities. So I think it's important to actually write them down, acknowledge who we are. The other thing I would add is that sometimes people view us as one identity, and we don't necessarily see ourselves that way. And that's okay. I think it's most important to understand the me piece, the me in research, and understanding sort of how I see myself. And that might be inside or outsider status. But I think it's just absolutely important to write down those identities, think about them, and see if they're changing the lens for your research.
I really like that. I think just being conscious of those identities is a step that often is not it's really a step often I forget, you know, as a researcher. Yes. Kabir, I saw your question in the chat, but maybe you want to unmute and ask it directly. Maybe, and if you could introduce yourself, say a little bit about your research, where you are, just that would be a good context as well, your identities.
Sure. So my name is Kabir, and I did a research paper on behavioral economics. And in your presentation, you mentioned that like in the homelessness research, you could view it as a economical lens, but also a social lens as well. So how would I, maybe as a economics researcher, at least at this point in time, be able to also mix in that social aspect as well to make it a more human-ish research as well?
Kabir, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And I would say I have two answers. One, if you're just starting a study, you could actually talk about different research methods based on different sort of academic paths. But knowing that the research has already been completed and you're talking about analysis, which is the second answer to my question, I think that is really well-rounded research project. So if you have looked at your data collection, you have analyzed it using a purely economic lens, I think it's worth going in and finding out what has already been done in fields that you're unfamiliar with. So in the social sciences, for example, right, we've got 6 social sciences, and something that, for those of you who have done some social science research, so a sociological lens, an economic lens, I know you've already done economics, anthropological lens is another one, a historic lens, a psychological lens, and then what am I forgetting the last one? I'm blanking right now, but thinking about all of the social sciences. So if you're taking a look at your research and you're saying, I'm only looking through this economic lens, you're only going to end up with results that work for people who think that way. So if you want your research to really reach a larger crowd, education, that's the last one. You might actually want to take a look at how educators or people who study the field of education, who have doctorates in education, or those who study the field of anthropology or mental health, how they look at the existing data that you're looking at, right? And then in your analysis section, and I've seen wonderful undergrad research papers that have an analysis section that actually have subtitles or subheadings that talk about, if I was going to analyze these results through an economic lens, this is what I would say. If I was going to analyze these results through an anthropological lens, I would look at it this way. So I'd say the larger, the more willing you are to go outside of your comfort zone and look through different lenses, the richer your results will be. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Erica, I'll pass to you for your question. And if you could also introduce yourself, that would be so lovely. Kind of your background, what you did research, and where you're at. Yeah.
Got it. My name is Erica. I'm from New York, and I did my research paper on like developmental psych. So my question to you was kind of, you mentioned you taught that class on race. What initially kind of inspired you to become a sociologist and study race? And because I know, like in my kind of research process, I wanted to study so many different topics. I didn't, how do you kind of narrow it down to one thing?
And I wish I could, great question, Erica. And I wish I could tell you that it was a deep found love for the topic. I think for many of us who go into academics, it's what's available at the time, right? So I certainly had studied and was fascinated with multiracial families. That's my personal experience. Again, another personal experience, having a multiracial family. But for me, it really became what was available for example, to teach. And so I started being asked to teach classes on inequality because my university at the time in Washington, D.C. was having some real issues with some pretty horrific racist incidents at American University. And so we had sort of, as a university, as a community, had upped the number of classes that we were teaching to educate, especially our first year students, on what was happening in the world. And so many of us were becoming much more well-versed in particular areas of teaching. So I would say that it was a mixture of my personal family experience and my desire to learn more coming from a multiracial family, but also the idea that there was a community need. So if you went back to that list with my asterisk on the first one, there was also a community need in the institution where I was an academic, who said we need to do a better job educating others. So for me, it was two pieces there. One thing I'd love to say, and I think it's maybe a larger answer to your very good question, is if there is something you just want to study, but you don't have the language or the narrative for it yet, don't give up. You can fumble your way through anything for a few years, and many of us do. I know I want to do this thing and I want to solve this problem, but I have no idea the lens I'm going to use or the methodology and how to do it. And then just read, see what people are doing in the field. And one piece of advice, and this might be a great piece of advice to even end on, is if you read a study that interests you as a high school student or as an undergrad, and you think, man, I want to be this person someday, I want to do what this person's doing, send an email to that person. I can't tell you how often they will respond. I'm an undergrad or I'm a high school student. I just read your study and I'm so interested in it. Where do I start? What do I read? Not only if they're local, might they actually take you to Starbucks, but they'll probably become a pen pal with you, because I think academics so much want to pass on their knowledge and their path to younger people. So don't give up.
Thank you.
Perfect. I want to pass to Surabhi. Surabhi, if you'd be willing to turn on your video and introduce yourself, or at least introduce. Thank you so much. In the same way that other students introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Surabhi, and my paper was also in the economic science. And I was just wondering if it's useful in a paper that's like a literature review or more qualitative, if it's useful to address your lenses and your biases, or maybe not like your specific lenses, or maybe just the lenses you've looked at the study with, if that is important to address in the paper, or whether it's just more important for you to be aware of.
Thanks for asking that question, Surabhi. And I would say that I don't think there's one answer. I think it really has to do with where you're trying to get your paper published and what audiences you're going to be in front of. So there'll be academic journals and they don't want to see that. And then there'll be academic journals that welcome that and actually will select your journal because of that. So I would do your research and look at other people in a particular journal you might be applying to. A lot of times the subjective piece, the I piece, I'm going to acknowledge my bias piece, is in an introduction. So it may not actually be embedded in the research, but it might be written in the research. Even if you've used in the research, you may not actually narrate that. But I think you should kind of keep an eye to where you'd love your work to show up and what audiences you want your work in front of, and see who acknowledges that or who welcomes that kind of language better. That said, I think it should always be done, but it doesn't always need to be in the paper. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. Sure.
Perfect. I think we'll pass to Advan, if you'd be willing to. Perfect. Yes. Hello. Let's be able to introduce yourself.
So my name is Advan. I'm doing my research paper on stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. So my question was, so should there be a line between mixing different theoretical lenses and approaching the same topic from different fields of knowledge? Because it might leave your research more shallow in multiple fields by the end of it. I was wondering should there be that demarcation line between the two?
That's a great question, Advan. I would say if you have the time, and again, we have to be honest here. We have to acknowledge that sometimes our research is time centric, right? So we might have to have it done for a class or for a project by a certain time. But keep in mind that your first research project is not going to be your last. And so you might want to narrow this with one or two lenses, but collect your own data about the lenses you want to use as the project expands and grows, or you might want to take different arms of that project forward. I am a believer that multiple disciplines is absolutely always better. The book that I wrote called How to College, I wrote with a colleague who is a civil rights attorney. And she and I often speak to audiences, and we joke around and we say, sociologist and a lawyer walked into a bar, because we really believe that our lenses together help us tell our story. She talks a lot about free speech and what speech is on college campuses for first-year students. And I talk about the transition to college and how that is an important piece of it. So if you're working alone, you can be those multiple disciplines in your head. Don't have to be an expert in all of them, but I would say you should know if you are looking at something through a psychosocial lens, but you want to kind of check out an economic lens and you do not have that background, I would go to, a basic economics 101 textbook and start looking at some of the theoretical perspectives that are in there, and just acknowledge that there's stuff you don't know, and figure out where you want to go. But again, I can't stress enough, you can start small with 1 or 2 lenses, and then you can grow. And I always have a notebook, a physical notebook near me when I'm doing my research, and I think I'm looking through this lens, or I'm using this methodology, but down the road, when this study expands, this is where I want to go, because I might see something that just sparks an interest. So, it's an ongoing process, and we're always learning and growing. Great question.
Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Brenner, for joining us. I loved how on the nose and relevant you made this to our group. And I think the questions really belie that, and being very thoughtful and really kind of getting into this question of identity and research. So just such a, I don't know if there's anything you want to say in conclusion, but just so grateful on behalf of Lumiere that you joined us.
Thank you for having me, Stephen, and thanks to your team. Congratulations to everyone. I'm really impressed. I'm proud. And you're absolutely above and beyond. You'll have no problem in college, because this is exactly the skill set you need to have when you enter. So congratulations, and keep learning.
Great.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Well, stick around if you can, or feel free to leave. We're going to transition into the next stage, which is some quick updates for the broader Lumiere community, and then into some student presentations, which is the real meat and very exciting. I have a really exciting announcement that I want to make to the broader community, which is that we've taken a big step as an organization to move from a financial aid program to actually setting up our own registered nonprofit to support students coming from low-income backgrounds to do research as part of Lumiere Research Scholar Program. So we've launched this nonprofit this past winter. We have 21 students coming from low-income backgrounds doing research. Of course, we have a lot of students already on financial aid. And just for those who are working with students, if you have students who are really excited by research and for any reason tuition might be a financial barrier to them, we'd really love them to apply. And you can check out the Lumiere Foundation website in the chat. I'll just share that for anyone who's interested. Maybe that's a small announcement, just continued push to increase access and inclusion in research. Okay, let's move on. Just want a quick congratulations. Go to the next slide. There's lots of names on this slide, but just wanted to say congratulations to all of you guys. Research is really hard, as I think many of you guys will have experienced. You are going really deep into a single subject, perhaps deeper than any person has ever gone before. And then you're trying to take that place where you are, where such a human knowledge is, and trying to extend upon it. It's something that is Herculean in its scope, in its difficulty, and I'm just so impressed that you guys have gone through it. We're going to see some student presentations of students who have really taken that ethos and moved to the next level in their research. But for everyone who's completed the research program, for everyone who's completed their research, submitted their final paper, just a big congratulations to you, and a real heartfelt one, because it's certainly something that is not easy. So congratulations. Okay. So now we'll move into the next part, and I'm going to pass to my team member, Nandini, who is going to be introducing students in the Scholar presentation.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, we're all super excited to just have all of you here with us and to celebrate this big moment together. And we've had such an amazing cohort, and I think this opportunity of having presentations is just for us to give you a sneak peek at what our students have been working on for the past couple of months.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jivana Luthra, and I'm from India. And today I'm here to present my research paper with you all. So before we get on, let me thank Lumiere and my mentor, Pablo, for helping me out throughout the journey of creating my research paper. So now, without further ado, let's get on. So there are thousands of neurological disorders affecting people on a regular basis. But what part of the population actually knows about them? Do you? Have you heard about Rett syndrome or myasthenia gravis? Maybe you haven't. So that is the point of my research paper, to share awareness about neurological disorders reported in the literature and how some of them manifest from a cognitive and behavioral neuroscience perspective. So before I go on with my methods, let me give you a little background information about it. So cognitive and behavioral neuroscience studies the brain and how we perceive, act, think, learn, and remember. And the main center that allows cognition and behavior is the brain, which is obviously the part of the nervous system. Now, the nervous system is majorly divided into three parts. That is the brain, the nerves, and the spinal cord. The brain is mainly divided into 6 regions, that is the medulla, the pons, the midbrain, the cerebellum, the dicephalon, and the cerebral hemispheres, are also known as the telecephalon. So the basic unit of nerves is the neuron. And the neuron is also divided into multiple parts, such as the axons, axon terminals, dendrites, etc. And then there is the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is located at the dorsal side of our body, and it controls processes such as the reflex actions. Now, apart from these structures, there is something known as gene expression and molecular expression, which also play a crucial role in making sure that our day-to-day activities are performed with ease. So what is gene expression? So gene expression is basically certain genes that help make sure that our organs are functioning properly. And molecular expression is basically the role of certain chemicals that also make sure that certain things that are supposed to happen at the right time and with ease. So now let's get on with my methods and analysis. So in my research paper, I use 2 main methods. First, methods used for gathering information, and second, methods for analysis. Under methods for gathering information, first thing I did was understand concepts through reading, where I basically searched for research papers relevant to my topic from sites such as Skyhub and Google Scholar. And then I found out papers and extracted information that was relevant to my topic. And two things that I loved going through was a book called Principles of Neural Science and a paper known as Genetics of Hereditary Neurological Disorders in Children. Apart from this, I also extracted data about Google searches from Google, where being the age where people, tend to search up things on Google, what I searched was how many people searched up a particular neurological disorder, such as Alzheimer's disease. And based on that, I analyzed the amount of awareness people had on a particular group of neurological disorders. And from that, I had collected data from each month from the year 2004 till 2022. So you can imagine that's loads of data. So to make my task easier, I had made graphs, particularly line graphs, and compared the data. And now my findings. So the comparison of awareness between various types of neuropsychiatric disorders suggested that the majority of population is aware about ASD, that is autism spectrum disorder, but suffers in awareness about Angelman syndrome. Another category was neurological disorder, neurological diseases caused due to an injury or other environmental factors. So out of that, meningitis was was a disease where people were aware about, and Lombardis disease was where there was least awareness. And there was another category that I analyzed that was neuromuscular disorders. So in total, there were 3 categories that I analyzed. And out of that, there was neuromuscular disorders that had the least awareness, that is about 3.7 to 4.99 per 10,000. And overall, the lower the occurrence rate, the lesser the awareness. And the conclusion was that with advancement in technology, more and more disorders are being understood and shared with the public to raise awareness, like this, preventing disorders and improving the quality of life of afflicted people. So that's my research paper, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Giovanna, for sharing. And once again, congratulations on graduating. But I think more than the research that you presented, I love the way that you explained how you went about doing your research as well. So thank you so much for doing that. We now have Adavan, who will be talking us through model minority stereotypes. Adavan, the floor is yours.
So hello, my name is Adavan, and today I will be presenting my research about the causes and consequences of the model minority stereotype in Asian American adolescents. I completed this research along with my mentor, Andrea Shannon Mora, so I'd like to thank her for helping me through the journey as well. Next slide. So stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination have been studied by psychologists intensively due to their interconnectedness. Oftentimes, these are considered negative in society due to the harmful consequences they have. However, research tends to provide both the cons and pros of their presence. In particular, one such form of stereotyping that is researched extensively in America due to its commonality is the model minority stereotype. The model minority stereotype, otherwise which can be shortened to MMS, labels Asian Americans as more studious, more likely to be successful, and law-abiding. This is especially impacting Asian American adolescents who experience this at school. COVID has also increased the necessity for research into this topic due to the increased discrimination against Asians, especially those of Chinese origin, which has been further amplified by the model minority stereotype. So MMS began in the 1960s when magazines were publishing stories of Asian success, pointing towards them as a model for other minorities to follow instead of complaining about the current situation. Hardworking, industrious, and an uncomplaining group. That was how they were portrayed. Asian American parents also endorsed the stereotype at the time, but they saw education as a way to safeguard against the potential racism and discrimination. So in order to research this topic, I chose to do a systematic literature review. And in this, I chose to follow the Prisma flow diagram, which you can see on the right, by identifying 50 articles based on keywords such as cause, model minority stereotype, adolescence, and etc. I filtered the articles based on title and abstract before reading the papers in order to finalize which ones I'd be using. And I ended up using 6 research papers in my literature review after this process. So by the end of it, I had 4 final findings. The first being the fact that the model minority stereotype was initially formed by Americans in order to provide the argument that other minorities should follow Asian Americans as an example instead of complaining about the racism and oppression they were facing. This was also endorsed by Asian American parents who used it as a method of protecting their children and themselves from potential discrimination. This was the cause and how the model minority stereotype was formed, which answers the first part of my research question. Unfortunately, today, as a consequence, it is negatively impacting the mental health of Asian American adolescents who often crumble under the pressure that the model minority stereotype puts on them due to not meeting or being afraid of not meeting expectations. Prejudice due to the stereotype is also leading to ignorance regarding discrimination against Asian Americans, due to other people often ignoring their struggles. This is then justified by the hardworking nature and history of overcoming challenges that MMS attributed towards them. It's also much more important and relevant today to address the issue of prejudice due to the fact that COVID has increased the discrimination Asian Americans face. Social relationships are also being defined by how well Asian Americans fit into the model minority stereotype model. This has been seen in studies where more often than not, if an Asian American does not conform to the model minority stereotype, they are less likely to continue, maintain, or form a relationship with other groups. On the other hand, the model minority stereotype can also help encourage Asian American adolescents to meet expectations. This is based on the self-fulfilling prophecy theory introduced by Malkin, where when expectations are set on a child or person, they are seen to be more likely to meet those very same expectations. Now, during my research into the model minority stereotype, I found there was a huge gap in the research itself, where studies into the efficacy and practicality of methods to prevent the negative effects of MMS on adolescent minds is something that has not been addressed fully yet. While the effects and possible consequences of MMS have been discussed in great detail, the prevention of the negative consequences of the model minority stereotype is less highlighted in research papers. This needs to be addressed immediately with greater urgency than it currently is, especially due to the fact that the Asian American minority is one of the fastest growing minorities in America itself. This means that they have the largest population of adolescents among the minorities who are being influenced by the stereotype and could therefore be subjected to even more discrimination, leading to possible long-term effects on their mental health. Limiting the exposure of students, both Asian Americans and other adolescents who might propagate it towards the model minority stereotype is crucial to mitigating the negative consequences of the stereotype. While it cannot be eradicated from American society forever, limiting the influence it has on children would be a huge step forwards towards making sure we can limit the negative consequences while keeping the positive effects the stereotype has on Asian American adolescents as well. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much, Arthavan. And again, congratulations on graduating. And I think it's amazing how you've just thought about the other adolescents and the community as a whole that we currently exist in. To finally close off the evening, our final presentation is by Surbhi, who will be talking about data and their strategic factors affecting sustainable decisions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Surbhi Joshi. I hope you guys are doing well. And my paper is in the social sciences. So my research question is, what types of data inform strategic factors affecting sustainability decisions in the retail industry? What this means is that in any industry, firms make decisions pertaining to sustainability, and there are certain factors that are considered while making these decisions. But to get these factors, there's some data that shapes these factors. And my paper investigated the factors and the data forming it. So for some background, sustainability has become more and more important in everyone's lives, from the day-to-day to the larger scale global issues. And businesses and the power of economics,
Nandini, you're sharing, you shared the wrong screen.
So businesses and the power of economics can help actionize sustainability. And what this means is that sustainability can become more of a tangible thing that can be implemented. And the reason I chose retail as the context of my paper is because retail has a large impact in sustainability, with 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions being caused by the retail supply chain. But despite this, businesses need economic incentivization as well as social, which is called the business case. So the business case is that for any social impact caused, there must be economic justification as well as social justification. And businesses have to consider a lot of different factors in making these decisions and making a corporate strategy. And data is the backbone to this. So my paper used a literature review, which involved finding and evaluating papers on three main things: sustainability in retail, factors involved in sustainability decisions, and the data surrounding this, which involved quantitative financial data as well as qualitative market data and everything in between. So I used 48 sources to show that there is literature on these three topics, but where there's a lack is the intersection of these three topics. So there were 5 non-academic articles used to show this gap, which my paper hopes to begin to fill. And I use Nike as a case study throughout the paper to exemplify concepts. So my findings were twofold in the strategic factors area and the data area. In the strategic factor area, I identified 2 key factors. The first one is stakeholder theory, and this is over shareholder theory. A shareholder is anyone who has a financial stake in the company, but a stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the company, be it internally like an employee or externally as far as the government. So the firm's ability to prioritize different stakeholders is extremely important because different stakeholders have different motivation and different interests, which affects the corporate strategy and affects how sustainability plays into it. The other extremely important key factor was the competitive environment. And the competitive environment is the industry, in this case, retail, as well as the firm's role in the industry. This is extremely important in retail because retail is a very volatile, continuously changing industry, and it is very competitively dense. This is an important factor because it paves the way to a sustainable business case. There are many frameworks around this, like Porter's 5 forces. Not only are these 2 factors extremely important themselves, they also help a business to prioritize the other factors I talked about in my paper. The other factors involve financial factors such as profit maximization and the financial position of the company, which might be some of the things you think about when I say finance, but also the macroeconomic situation. So whether there's an economic recession or a boom. Some other factors involve top management, which is about the people running the company. So how they care about sustainability as well as risk management, which is extremely important in sustainability because it's slightly a gray area still, because it's an emerging field. And internal dynamics, which is tangentially related, but it's more about the early integration of sustainability. So how early sustainability was integrated into the corporate strategy, and the internal competition for resources. So if a firm has 10 projects, it's likely that there will be as many resources for integrating sustainability, which obviously comes into the decision-making process. Finally, the last but extremely important factor is the supply chain. As mentioned before, it's very important, especially for retail companies, because that's where majority of the greenhouse gas emissions come from, and it is a key factor. So moving on to the data side of it, there were 2 main takeaways in terms of the data. The first one being about metrics. So these are ESG metrics or reporting methods like auditing and benchmarking. And there are 3 main takeaways within this. Firstly, they're extremely important. And this is because they help breach the information gap that I'll talk about later with the factors. And they are also not standardized, meaning there are many different metrics that different businesses use, which makes it hard for each individual business to find a way to incorporate sustainability into their strategy. And thirdly, these metrics generally cater to the supply chain, which is good because the supply chain is very important, but also could be diversified. The second finding was about the information gap that I mentioned before. The information gap is generally regarding these different factors because of 2 main reasons. The first is the lack of utilization of data, and this again pertains to the ESG metrics and things like that I was mentioning before. Because of the lack of standardization, a lot of businesses have a lot of data and don't know how to use it because there's so much and they may not have the resources to try to figure out how to standardize it. So resources used by other businesses to try to standardize these metrics. The second one is a lack of knowledge or ignorance about data. So this is generally in stakeholder theory because there is not enough education about the holistic importance of stakeholders, and usually each stakeholder is considered individually. So these results aid in the education of integrating sustainability and retail into corporate strategies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Surbi, for sharing. And I think this was extremely thoughtful. And I think it took me back to just being in one of my business classes as well. So I really appreciate it, and congratulations on graduating. Stephen, right back at you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Surbi, for that. I loved, I know we've spoken before, but I'm super impressed to see this final presentation. And it's so clear that the way that you, by the way, the way that you talk about this, I feel like you're like somehow a high school student in like the minds of a like junior faculty member at Wharton. So this is such a impressive, it's just impressive. And it really does exactly make me kind of go back to time at HBS. And these are exactly the things that business school researchers are thinking about. So I just want to like just step back and say, I was so impressed by these presentations. I mean, it's a very diverse and really actually a great representation of the diversity of what people can do in research, from looking at the luxury resale market to mitochondrial dysfunction to caregiving and neuroplasticity to neurological disorders, model minorities to now sustainability and the data surrounding that in the retail industry. I mean, you guys have gone so deep, and I can say genuinely that you guys are so much farther than any undergraduate I know in those topics, and probably most graduate students at that specific niche itself. There's a long road ahead, of course, if you want to continue to do research. I really hope that you guys do, given the clear potential that you have. But I just want to say congratulations again for doing what you've done. It's really, really not easy. So just a final quick message before we wrap up. I just want to encourage you guys to stay involved as part of the alumni network. We're going to have a lot of really exciting presentations coming up. We just had some mission officers from Colgate come this past weekend, but we should have probably around a dozen mission officer conversations over the next 12 weeks, which are exclusive to our alumni or to current students. So there's opportunity for you to talk to mission officers, hear what they think, and to test up some of your own ideas. Of course, stay active on Discord. It's a great way for you guys to stay connected. If you guys are looking for an internship, come hang out with us. We're always looking for our alums as well to help expand research opportunities to amazing students. So I just want to end right there. I also want to thank the Lumiere team, particularly for all of your work in setting up the symposium. This was really impressive. Like, I'm so impressed in particular with the students who presented today. So thank you guys. Welcome to Lumiere family, the Illuminati. That is a work in progress title, by the way. If anyone has any feedback on what should be the name of a Lumiere alum, right now the term Illuminati is an idea. Send me your feedback, but don't send it publicly unless it's positive. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. I really, really enjoyed spending time with you all. And okay, thanks, Kabir. Thank you. Thank you. Solid. Not too positive, but you're giving me like, directionally correct. You have a deep knowledge in luxury resale, so I will take your opinion seriously. Fabulous. Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the day, enjoy the night, wherever you might be. And thank you guys again for making this such a special event.